The village of Marabad lay hidden between dry hills and cracked fields, a place the world had forgotten long ago. Dust ruled the roads, and silence ruled the nights. The people woke before sunrise, worked until their hands ached, and returned home before darkness fully claimed the sky. Fear had become a habit here, quiet, invisible, and heavy. Among these people lived a young man named Ali. Ali was not rich nor powerful. His clothes were worn, his house small, and his meals simple. Yet there was something about him that made people pause when he spoke. He listened more than he talked, observed more than he acted. And when he did speak, his words carried calm strength. His father had died years ago, crushed under debt and injustice, leaving Ali with his mother and a promise burned deep in his heart: never bow to false power. Every evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, darkness spread like a slow disease. There was no electricity in Marabad. The night belonged to shadows, whispers, and locked doors. But in the center of the village, one small flame refused to disappear. Ali lit an old oil lamp every night and placed it near his window. It was a simple lamp, glass cracked, metal rusted, but its light spilled softly into the street. Children passing by slowed their steps. Old men rested their eyes on it. Women, carrying water, glanced toward it as if it could protect them. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. That flame meant hope. The village had a ruler, Haji Karim, a landlord who owned nearly everything: the fields, the water wells, even the grain store. His men rode horses through the village, collecting taxes, enforcing silence, and reminding everyone who truly mattered. Haji Karim lived in a large house on the hill, surrounded by guards and walls, while the villagers counted coins to survive another week. Resistance did not exist in Marabad. Not anymore. Years ago, a man had tried to speak out. He disappeared one night, and no one ever asked where he went. After that, people learned the safest language was silence. Ali knew this history. He had grown up hearing stories whispered behind closed doors. He had watched his mother lower her eyes whenever the landlord's men passed. He had seen fear teach children how to grow old too early. Yet Ali's lamp still burned. One evening, an old man named Rashid stopped near Ali's window. His back was bent, his beard white like ash. He stared at the flame for a long time before speaking. "Why do you light it every night, son?" Rashid asked quietly. Ali looked at the lamp, then back at the old man. "So I don't forget," he replied. "Forget what?" "That darkness is not natural. It is chosen." Rashid said nothing more. He nodded once and walked away, his heart heavier than before. That same night, word spread that Haji Karim would visit the village the next morning. Such visits never brought good news. People prepared themselves for loss: grain, money, dignity. Mothers hid what little they had. Men avoided eye contact. Fear sharpened the air. Ali sat with his mother late into the night. "Don't speak tomorrow," she warned him, her voice trembling. "I've already lost your father. I can't lose you too." Ali held her hands gently. "I won't be reckless," he said. But inside, his heart burned brighter than the lamp. Morning arrived with the sound of hooves. Haji Karim's men rode in like a storm, dust rising behind them. The landlord himself followed, draped in fine clothes, his face cold and distant. The villagers gathered in the open square, heads lowered, backs bent. Haji Karim announced new taxes, higher, crueler, impossible. Murmurs spread, quickly silenced by sharp looks from the guards. Ali felt something tighten inside his chest. He stepped forward. The square froze. "My lord," Ali said, his voice steady, "people here barely survive. These taxes will starve families." Gasps escaped the crowd. His mother cried out softly. Haji Karim turned slowly, studying Ali like one might study an insect. "And who are you?" he asked to speak. "A son of this village," Ali replied, "and someone who refuses to watch it die." Silence fell like a blade. Haji Karim smiled, but it was not kindness. It was warning. "Be careful, boy," he said calmly. "Flames that burn too bright are easily extinguished." That night, Ali returned home. He lit his lamp as always. But shadows moved differently. A stone shattered the window. Then another. The lamp fell, oil spilled, glass broke, and the flame died with a sharp hiss. Laughter echoed in the distance. Ollie stood in the darkness, staring at the smoke rising from the floor. The village slept, but something had changed. The flame was gone, and with it, the illusion that darkness would allow hope to survive quietly. The soldiers of Stalingrad called it Rattenkrieg, the War of Rats. By the third day after the failed German assault, Ivan Petrov understood why. There were no clear front lines anymore. No safe streets. No quiet corners. The city had been torn apart so completely that it had become a maze of ruins, cellars, tunnels, and half-collapsed buildings. Men fought like animals, crawling through debris, listening for footsteps, breathing quietly in the dark. Ivan's unit was moved at night. Orders came in whispers. Maps were useless. Entire streets no longer existed. Sergeant Orlov led them through broken walls and shattered staircases, avoiding open ground. German snipers ruled the streets during daylight. One careless step into the open could mean instant death. Ivan carried extra ammunition now. He had learned quickly. In Stalingrad, running out of bullets was worse than being wounded. They reached a destroyed factory complex near the Volga, once a place where thousands had worked, now nothing but twisted metal and blackened concrete. The smell of oil, smoke, and decay filled the air. Somewhere nearby, artillery thundered without pause. "Listen carefully," Orlov whispered as they took positions inside the factory ruins. "The Germans are already inside this place. We don't know where. Keep your eyes open. Keep your mouths shut." Ivan nodded, his heart beating fast. Hours passed. Snow drifted through holes in the roof. Pipes dripped water that instantly froze on the floor. Every sound felt amplified. The scrape of a boot, the click of a rifle bolt, the distant cough of a wounded man. Then came the shot. A sharp crack echoed through the factory. A soldier two positions to Ivan's left collapsed without a sound. Blood spread beneath him, dark and steaming. "Sniper," someone whispered. Panic rippled through the unit, but Orlov reacted instantly. "Down. Stay low," he hissed. Ivan pressed himself against the concrete floor, barely daring to breathe. His mind raced. The sniper could be anywhere, above, below, behind a wall. German snipers were ghosts, patient and deadly. Some waited hours for a single shot. Minutes stretched into eternity. Another shot rang out. This time, the bullet struck the wall inches from Ivan's head, spraying dust and stone into his face. His ears rang. He tasted blood. Fear tightened its grip around his chest. Orlov signaled two men forward. They moved slowly, silently, using shadows and rubble for cover. Ivan watched them disappear behind a collapsed machine. Suddenly, gunfire. Short, violent, then silence. One of the men returned, breathing hard. "Sniper's dead," he whispered. "German. Young." Ivan felt a strange emptiness at those words. Young. Just like him. The fighting intensified as the day wore on. German infantry pushed deeper into the factory, using flamethrowers to clear rooms and cellars. Fire roared through corridors, turning hiding places into death traps. The screams of burning men echoed through the ruins. Ivan and his squad were ordered to counterattack. They advanced through a narrow corridor choked with debris. Smoke burned Ivan's lungs. Visibility was almost zero. Somewhere ahead, German voices shouted commands. A grenade exploded nearby, throwing Ivan against the wall. His helmet flew off. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he forced himself to move. He grabbed his rifle and followed Orlov forward. They burst into a room. A German soldier stood there, frozen in shock. Ivan fired first. The man dropped instantly. There was no hesitation this time. No thought. Only survival. By afternoon, the factory was divided. Soviets on one floor, Germans on another. Sometimes they were separated by nothing more than a thin wall or a pile of rubble. Soldiers threw grenades through holes in the ceiling. Bayonets were used in darkness. Men fought hand to hand like something out of a nightmare. Ivan lost track of time. He lost track of how many he had killed. At some point, the firing slowed. Both sides were exhausted, low on ammunition, wounded and freezing. An uneasy silence settled over the factory. Ivan sat beside Orlov, his back against a wall. His hands trembled uncontrollably. "You're doing well," Orlov said quietly, though his own face was pale. "Most don't survive their first week here." Ivan didn't reply. He stared at the floor, where a piece of chalk still showed part of an old factory marking. Shift B. A reminder of normal life, of work, routine, peace. That world felt impossible now. Night fell again. Supplies arrived across the Volga under heavy fire. Boats were hit by shells. Men drowned in icy water. But some made it through. Ivan received new ammunition, a piece of bread, and a letter, though it wasn't for him. The man it belonged to had died that morning. Ivan held the letter anyway. He wondered if someone would ever hold his. As he prepared for another night of fighting, Ivan realized something terrifying. Stalingrad was changing him. The boy who had arrived months ago was gone. In his place stood a soldier shaped by ruins, blood, and relentless fear. And the battle was far from over. The Germans were not finished. Neither was Stalingrad. By November 1942, the war around Stalingrad began to change. Not with a single explosion or a dramatic announcement, but with a feeling. The Germans were still attacking, still firing, still pushing forward. Yet something in their movements felt uncertain. Less confident. Less precise. Rumors moved faster than bullets through the ruins. The Red Army was preparing something big. Ivan Petrov learned this on a freezing night when his unit was pulled back from the factory ruins. Orders came suddenly, passed from mouth to mouth. "The front is shifting," Sergeant Orlov said quietly. "High command says the Germans are being surrounded." Surrounded. The word felt unreal. For months, the Germans had seemed unstoppable, machines of steel and discipline. Now, the idea that they could be trapped inside Stalingrad felt almost dangerous to believe. Yet the signs were there. German attack slowed. Ammunition shortages became obvious. Prisoners spoke of empty fuel tanks, broken supply lines, and promises of air support that never came. The sky, once filled with German aircraft, grew strangely quiet. Operation Uranus had begun. Outside the city, Soviet forces smashed through weaker Axis flanks. Tanks rolled forward. Entire enemy divisions collapsed. And slowly, inevitably, the jaws closed around the German Sixth Army. Inside Stalingrad, however, nothing became easier. If anything, the fighting grew more desperate. Ivan's unit was ordered back toward the riverbank to block any German attempt to break out. Snowstorms reduced visibility to almost nothing. Men marched like ghosts through white darkness, weapons freezing to their gloves, boots stiff with ice. Hunger arrived next. Rations were cut. One piece of bread had to last an entire day. Soup was thin and often frozen before it reached the mouth. Wounded men were evacuated only when boats could cross the Volga under fire, and many never made it. One evening, Ivan watched German soldiers through a shattered wall. They looked different now. Thinner, dirtier, exhausted. No songs, no confident shouts. Just tired men clinging to ruined buildings, just like the Soviets. War had made them equal. A sudden German counterattack shattered the silence. Artillery slammed into Soviet positions as infantry charged forward, desperate to break the encirclement before it fully closed. Ivan's unit was caught in close combat near a rail yard. Trains lay overturned like dead animals, frozen wheels sticking into the air. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Ivan fired until his rifle clicked empty. He grabbed grenades, throwing them blindly into smoke-filled shadows. Screams followed. Then silence. Then more screams. At one point, a German soldier tackled Ivan to the ground. They rolled in the snow, fighting for control of a knife. The man's breath smelled of metal and fear. Ivan felt the blade cut into his glove, slicing skin. Panic surged through him. He headbutted the man hard. The German collapsed, dazed. Ivan didn't think. He acted. When it was over, Ivan sat shaking beside the body, blood soaking into the snow beneath them both. He stared at his hands, barely recognizing them as his own. Orlov found him minutes later. "You're alive," the sergeant said simply. Ivan nodded, unable to speak. That night, Soviet artillery thundered without pause. The encirclement was complete. The Germans were trapped. Inside the pocket, chaos erupted. Air supply drops fell into Soviet-controlled areas. Starving German soldiers fought each other for scraps. Wounded men froze to death in cellars. Officers spoke of relief forces that never came. Ivan witnessed it firsthand when his unit overran a German field hospital. There were no screams, only silence. Men lay on stretchers, eyes open, staring at nothing. Doctors sat motionless, hands numb, supplies long gone. One German medic looked up at Ivan and raised his hand slowly. "We have nothing left," he said in broken Russian. Ivan lowered his rifle. For the first time since arriving in Stalingrad, he felt something close to pity. Winter tightened its grip. Temperatures fell below -30 degrees. Weapons malfunctioned. Fingers blackened with frostbite. Men slept sitting up, afraid they wouldn't wake if they lay down. One night, Orlov gathered the survivors of the unit. Only 6 men remained. "The Germans won't last much longer," he said. "But don't think that means we relax. A cornered enemy is the most dangerous kind." Ivan understood. He had seen desperation. He had lived it. Days blurred together. Attack, defense, silence, shelling, hunger, cold. The city seemed to shrink, crushed under snow and steel. Bodies were used as cover. Names were forgotten. Survival became the only goal. Then, in late January 1943, the order came. Final assault. Ivan stood at the edge of a ruined square as Soviet forces prepared to crush the remaining German resistance. Artillery lined the horizon. Thousands of guns waited for the signal. He looked around at the men beside him. Older, younger, broken, hardened. All survivors. The signal flare rose into the gray sky, and the gun spoke. As Ivan advanced through the ruins one last time, he knew something had changed forever, not just in the war, but inside him. Whatever waited at the end of this battle, the boy from the village near the Volga would never return. Only a soldier would walk out of Stalingrad, if anyone walked out at all. By the end of January 1943, Stalingrad had become a prison. The German Sixth Army was no longer an army in the true sense. It was a collection of shattered units, starving men, frozen weapons, and broken promises. Soviet artillery encircled the ruins like an iron fist, tightening day by day. There was nowhere left to run. Ivan Petrov could feel it in the air. The gunfire had changed. It was no longer aggressive, it was desperate. Soviet loudspeakers were set up along the front lines, their voices echoing through the ruins in German. "You are surrounded. Lay down your weapons. You will be treated according to international law." Most Germans did not believe it. Some laughed bitterly. Others cursed. Many simply stared into the snow, too exhausted to feel hope or fear anymore. Ivan's unit advanced cautiously through what had once been a residential district. Entire buildings had collapsed into themselves, forming twisted caves of concrete and rebar. The smell of death was everywhere, unburied bodies frozen in place, faces locked in final expressions of terror or emptiness. A German soldier stumbled out of a doorway ahead of him. He was unarmed. His uniform hung loosely on his frame. His boots were wrapped in rags. His face was pale, lips cracked and blue from cold. He raised his hands slowly. "Ich Jenig," he whispered. Enough. Ivan watched as the man collapsed into the snow, too weak to stand. A Soviet soldier rushed forward, disarming him gently. No one shouted. No one struck him. There was no strength left for cruelty. More Germans followed. Small groups at first, then entire squads. Officers without insignia. Soldiers carrying white cloths tied to rifle barrels. Men who no longer looked like conquerors, only survivors. But not everyone surrendered. In the northern part of the city, pockets of resistance remained. Fanatical officers forced men to fight on, promising relief that would never arrive. Those areas became killing grounds. Ivan was sent with his unit to clear one such pocket near the remains of a factory complex. The Germans inside were cornered, starving, and terrified. The fighting was brutal. Grenades were thrown into cellars. Shots were fired at point-blank range. Screams echoed in the darkness. Ivan moved forward mechanically, doing what he had been trained to do, pushing aside the growing weight in his chest. In one cellar, he found a German officer sitting against a wall. The man was still wearing his cap. His pistol lay on the ground, untouched. He looked up at Ivan calmly. "I was a teacher," the officer said quietly in Russian with a thick accent. "Before the war." Ivan lowered his rifle slightly. The officer nodded once. "Do what you must." Moments later, the cellar was silent. Ivan stepped outside, breathing heavily. Snow fell around him, soft and indifferent. He felt nothing. Not victory. Not pride. Only emptiness. That night, the Soviets split the German pocket in two. Radio intercepts confirmed what many already knew. Field Marshal Paulus had been promoted, but not allowed to surrender. Hitler expected him to fight to the last man. Paulus did not. On January 31, 1943, the southern group of the 6th Army surrendered. When the news spread, men stared at each other in disbelief. It was over. Not completely, but enough. Ivan walked through the ruins the next morning as thousands of German soldiers were marched into captivity. The column seemed endless. Men limped, supported each other, some barely conscious. Guards walked beside them silently. One German soldier looked directly at Ivan as he passed. He was young, younger than Ivan. For a brief moment, their eyes met. No hatred, no anger, just exhaustion. Ivan looked away. The northern group surrendered 2 days later. The Battle of Stalingrad was finished. Victory celebrations did not come immediately. There were too many dead. The city was destroyed beyond recognition. Nearly every building was damaged or ruined. Tens of thousands of bodies lay buried under snow and rubble. The Volga flowed quietly past the wreckage, unchanged, as if nothing had happened. Ivan stood on the riverbank one evening, watching the sunset paint the frozen water in red and gold. Sergeant Orlov stood beside him, lighting his last cigarette. "We stopped them," Orlov said quietly. "The world will remember this." Ivan nodded, but his thoughts were far away. He remembered the factory floors, the sniper's bullet, the man in the cellar, the German soldier's eyes. He wondered what victory really meant. Orders came soon after. Units would be rotated out, refitted, and sent west. The war was far from over. Berlin still lay ahead. As Ivan packed his gear, he realized he was no longer afraid of battle. That realization frightened him more than anything else. Stalingrad had broken the enemy, but it had also broken something inside him, and he did not know if it could ever be repaired. The war did not end at Stalingrad, but something else did. When Ivan Petrov left the ruins of the city in February 1943, he did not look back. He carried his rifle, his worn pack, and memories heavier than both. The wind howled through broken streets as trains moved westward, carrying soldiers toward new battles, new names, new graves. Stalingrad faded behind him, but it never truly let him go. Ivan's unit was refitted and sent forward with the advancing Red Army. They fought through Ukraine, then into Eastern Europe. Each city looked different, yet felt the same. Ruined houses, empty eyes, silent roads. Victory followed them, but it did not feel glorious. It felt mechanical, inevitable, cold. Sergeant Orlov was killed in Poland. A mortar shell landed without warning. One moment he was speaking, the next he was gone. Ivan buried him in frozen earth with a helmet as a marker. He did not cry. He had learned that tears froze too quickly to fall. By 1945, Ivan was no longer 19. The war ended in Berlin. The city burned just as Stalingrad had, though the ruins felt different. There was celebration, shouting, flags raised high, but also revenge, chaos, and sorrow. Ivan stood among thousands of soldiers as news of Germany's surrender spread. Men laughed, hugged, fired shots into the air. Ivan felt nothing. That night, he sat alone in a shattered building, staring at his hands. They were steady now. Too steady. He wondered how many lives they had taken. When he returned home months later, the village near the Volga barely recognized him. His mother stood at the door when he arrived, thinner, older, but alive. She touched his face as if to confirm he was real. They did not speak for a long time. Some things did not need words. The village welcomed him as a hero. Ivan avoided their eyes. At night, he could not sleep. The silence was too loud. He heard artillery in the wind, footsteps in the dark. He woke soaked in sweat, heart racing, reaching for a rifle that was no longer there. Stalingrad visited him in dreams. Years passed. Ivan married. He worked. He smiled when expected. He built a life piece by piece, careful and quiet. Yet part of him remained in the ruins, frozen in snow, surrounded by shadows. In 1962, on the 20th anniversary of the battle, Ivan returned to Stalingrad, now called Volgograd. The city had been rebuilt. New buildings stood where ruins once lay. Streets were clean. Children laughed. The Volga flowed peacefully under the sun. At the top of Mamayev Kurgan, the statue the motherland calls rose into the sky, her sword lifted high. Ivan climbed the hill slowly. He stood among veterans, men with medals on their chests and ghosts behind their eyes. Some spoke proudly of victory. Others remained silent. Ivan placed a flower at the memorial. He did not think of strategy or glory. He thought of faces. The boy in the factory, the teacher in the cellar, Sergeant Orlov lighting his last cigarette. The wind carried their names away. A young boy stood nearby, staring at the statue. "Did you fight here?" the child asked Ivan. Ivan looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally. "Was it scary?" Ivan knelt, so they were eye to eye. "Yes," he replied softly. "And it should never happen again." The boy nodded, not fully understanding. Ivan stood and walked away. That night, as he watched the river under the stars, something inside him loosened. Not healed, but lighter. The war would always live within him, but it no longer owned him completely. Stalingrad had taken his youth, but it had not taken his humanity. History would remember the battle as a turning point, a moment when the tide of war changed. But for Ivan Petrov, it was something simpler and heavier. It was where a boy became a soldier, and where a soldier learned the true cost of survival.